There was a millionaire named Richard Sterling. He lived above the city in a glass penthouse where the floor shone like water and the walls turned every sunrise into a private show. People said he built his empire with discipline and genius. People who worked for him used smaller words: ruthless, cold, untouchable. Richard liked those words. They kept him safe. At 3 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, Richard came home early from a meeting that had gone his way. The elevator whispered him to the top. The lights in the penthouse were dim. He always kept them that way to watch the skyline. He expected silence. Instead, he heard paper turning, soft, steady, like someone breathing with their fingers. On the marble floor, near the piano, a man sat cross-legged with a little pool of flashlight around him. He wore a coat that had been many colors before the city scrubbed them out. His hair was long and tangled. His shoes had split and been stitched again with thread that didn't match. Next to him, a battered notebook, a $5 calculator, and a library copy of Statistics for Decision-Making, dotted with pencil marks. Richard's voice filled the room like an alarm. "What are you doing in my home?" The man didn't scramble. He didn't beg. He tilted the flashlight away from Richard's eyes and answered calmly, as if he were apologizing for borrowing a chair. "Reading, sir. It's warm in here. The lobby lights turn off at midnight." "You broke in to study?" Richard's laugh was sharp. "This is not a shelter." "No, sir," the man said. "A sanctuary." "They aren't always the same." Security thundered up the stairs from the service hall. 2 men with radios and hard eyes. They grabbed the stranger by the arms. He didn't resist. He only reached sideways, closing his notebook with a careful hand, like a person protecting something more fragile than paper. "Who are you?" Richard demanded. "Name's Noah," the man said. "Noah Hale." "Mr. Hale," Richard replied. Every syllable polished and cold. "People like you don't belong here." Noah's mouth twitched, not a smile, but something like it had tried to grow and changed his mind. "People like me belong anywhere we can learn," he said softly. "But I'll go." "You'll go," Richard snapped, "and you'll be arrested for trespass." The guards started to march Noah toward the service door. He didn't struggle. He looked around once, taking in the books on the shelves, the city in the glass, the pen Richard had left uncapped on the piano. When his gaze returned to the millionaire, there was a strange light in it. Not anger, not fear, certainty. "With respect," Noah said, turning his head so only Richard could hear. "Lock your shred bins. You pay a company to slice your secrets into confetti. But confetti is only a celebration to people who don't know how to read the pieces." Richard felt something slide under his ribs. "What did you say?" Noah nodded toward the stack of folders on the long table. "You leave things on your desk when the meetings run late. You think no one sees. Someone always sees. Good night, sir." They pushed him into the service hall. The door sighed shut. The room went back to glass and breathing. Richard stood very still. Then fury returned hotter, safer. "Janet," he barked into the intercom. "Call the building manager. I want the security company replaced by morning. And call the police. Find that man." "Yes, Mr. Sterling," Janet's tired voice said. "What did he do?" "Existed where he shouldn't," Richard snapped. He hung up, but the sentence Noah had left behind kept walking around the room. "Confetti is only a celebration to people who don't know how to read the pieces." Ridiculous. A homeless man making riddles. Richard poured himself a drink he didn't want and stared at the city until the sun pulled the buildings into gold. When he finally slept, it was shallow and mean. While the penthouse windows turned warm, Noah Hale walked the 6 blocks to the public library. He had learned every steel seam of that neighborhood, which vents breathed heat in winter, which awnings didn't leak, which janitors nodded, and which pretended not to see him. He also knew the morning guard at the library by name. "Early again," the guard said when the door slid open. "Cold night?" "Colder pride up there," Noah said, smiling in a way that didn't require teeth. He took a corner table by an outlet, unfolded his notebook, and began to do what the city told him he had no right to do. He studied. The pages were neat. Names and times. License plates written in tidy block letters. Topics. Time series. Bid rotation. Variance red flags. Between equations, he copied sentences he'd overheard half-finished when elevator doors almost closed. Move it through meridian. Keep it off the books. Phase gamma will never touch the minutes. And in the margins, he wrote the kind of truths a person learns when the world stops holding them gently. Anger without aim is noise. Anger with proof is justice. He wasn't always homeless. Once, he had been a carpenter who could frame a wall square by eye, a husband who sang off-key to make the kitchen laugh, a man who paid rent on time and had a coffee mug that said, "Do the work." Then came a sick child. Then came bills that looked like phone numbers. Then came a job site fall, a back that healed crooked, a boss who folded sympathy into a handshake and quietly found someone cheaper. Then came nights under bridges and mornings on benches, and the long, slow education of being looked through. Noah learned to gather small advantages the way other men gathered coins. He learned which classes at the community college would let a gray man sit in the back if he promised not to need a name. He learned statistics because the world lied with numbers. He learned law because the world hid behind them. He learned to be invisible on purpose until he needed to be seen. 6 months earlier, he had started sleeping near Sterling Tower, under a steam grate, where the hum of the building disguised the hum of his hunger. He watched men with expensive shoes and expensive voices come and go at hours that didn't fit integrity. He learned the rhythms of shredders by the way the haulers swapped bins. He picked cans and picked stories, and found that both could be turned into something. He never planned to set foot in the penthouse. But that night, the lobby lights died early, the cold pressed hard, and he saw the service stairs propped by a lazy foot. He climbed, thought 10 minutes of warmth, and found a room full of answers he hadn't asked yet. He hadn't wanted to taunt the man. He had wanted to warn him and maybe warn himself that truth doesn't respect locks forever. When the library opened properly, the morning filled with people who measured their lives in pages. Noah faded into them like a leaf into a tree. He copied, he circled, he built a map. At 10, a young reporter he'd seen before at the coffee line slid into the chair across from him. The kid wore a tie like it was a dare, and carried the kind of notebook that said hungry in the right way. "Mr. Hale?" the reporter asked. "My name is Marcus Chen. I think you know something about Richard Sterling." Noah didn't answer at once. He studied the kid's eyes the way a carpenter studies a level. "I know something about the way people treat paper," he said at last, "and about the cost of believing no one is watching." Marcus lowered his voice. "I've been watching him for 2 years and never got close. If you have anything, documents, dates, patterns, we can make it matter." Noah's hand lay flat on his notebook. He could feel the grooves of every letter he'd pressed hard enough to tear the page. "I have pieces," he said. "Pieces are noisy until you set them right." "Then let's set them right," Marcus said. Noah nodded once. "On one condition." "Name it," You don't turn me into a joke, Noah said. You don't make me the story more than the story deserves. I'm not your headline. I'm a broom. A broom? Marcus blinked. Something that pushes what doesn't belong to the places where it does, Noah said, almost smiling. Do we understand each other? We do, Marcus said. And for the first time since a fall made ladders cruel, Noah believed a stranger. Up on the hill of glass, Richard Sterling tried to glue his world tighter. He replaced the guards. He doubled the cameras. He told himself the man's warning had been a bluff, an old trick from the street. But later that afternoon, his assistant brought him a message from the building manager. Stop leaving marked envelopes on the service cart. Staff see more than you think. Richard crumpled the paper and threw it away. Then he dug it out again, smoothed it flat, and locked it in a drawer. He didn't like how his hands shook. That night, away from the marble and the view, Noah Hale held his pencil like a small oath and wrote one more line. He told me I didn't belong. He's right. I don't belong under his feet. I belong in the light with the truth. And somewhere between the tower and the library, a story began to assemble itself from confetti. Richard Sterling's penthouse always smelled of polish, citrus, and quiet power. Yet after Noah Hale's intrusion, the silence carried a new edge, like glass about to crack. Richard walked his halls and caught himself glancing at corners, half expecting the ragged man to be there, flashlight in hand, fitting words into puzzles no one else had noticed. Security had tightened. The service stairs were now locked, cameras replaced, guards rotated every week. Still, Richard felt exposed. It wasn't the trespass that unsettled him, it was Noah's parting words. Confetti is only a celebration to people who don't know how to read the pieces. For 3 nights, Richard barely slept. His dreams replayed the sight of that notebook, the careful hand closing it. He told himself it meant nothing. But the more he tried to dismiss it, the more he realized something he hated to admit. The homeless man wasn't a fool. He was dangerous in the way truth is dangerous. Meanwhile, Noah was anything but reckless. Each morning, he studied at the library with Marcus Chen, the young reporter who dared to sit at his table. Marcus had the energy of someone who believed stories could change things. Noah had the slow patience of a man who had already learned how much the world resists change. Together, they sorted the fragments Noah had collected. License plates scribbled on crumpled paper matched Sterling's contractors. Times written in the margin of old flyers lined up with suspicious night deliveries. Stray invoices, fished from half-shredded trash, revealed duplicate payments and ghost companies. Piece by piece, the pile of noise began to form a shape. This isn't just bad accounting, Marcus muttered one afternoon. It's laundering. He's moving money through Meridian Logistics into shell accounts. Billions hidden in plain sight. Noah didn't answer. He only underlined a phrase, hidden in plain sight. The city above them buzzed with its usual indifference, but inside Sterling Tower, the air had changed. One evening, Richard's head of security laid a file on his desk. "We've identified the intruder," the man said. Noah Hale, age 54. Former carpenter, injured on a job 10 years ago. Wife deceased, son died young. Lost housing 6 years ago. He's been drifting since. And offer into spring. Richard flipped through the report. Arrest records, trespass, loitering, nothing violent. Notes from shelters. Keeps to himself, reads constantly, polite but withdrawn. Why would a man like that study corporate statistics in my home? Richard asked bitterly. The security chief shrugged. Obsession. Some of them fixate on patterns. Paranoia. Richard closed the file, but his unease deepened. Paranoia did not explain how Noah had known about the shredders, or about the envelopes, or about Meridian. That same night, Noah walked the alleys near the river. The city at dusk was a choir of horns and neon. He found warmth in the hum of a laundromat vent and opened his notebook. Arya Sterling passed by on her way from an art class. She noticed him, how could she not? He was a figure people tried not to see, yet there he sat, writing by the glow of a broken street lamp, as focused as if the world itself were an exam. Why do you do that? She asked, startling herself. Noah looked up. Do what? Study. Write. Nobody's grading you. He smiled faintly. Grades measure what fits on a test. Truth doesn't fit on tests. She tilted her head. You sound like a teacher. Not anymore, he said softly. Now I'm just someone the city decided not to keep. For a moment, she almost walked away. But something in his eyes, tired, yes, but steady, made her linger. And what if you find the truth you're looking for? Noah closed his notebook carefully. Then I'll know the city was wrong to throw me out. The next morning, Marcus pushed Noah harder. We need to publish. This isn't just scraps anymore. It's a map. Sterling is hiding billions offshore. Not yet, Noah said firmly. Truth told too early dies as rumor. We need the right moment. Marcus sighed. Do you know how dangerous this is? If they realize you're the source. They already know, Noah interrupted. He remembered Richard's eyes narrowing, the promise of search and arrest. That's why we move carefully. Truth is fire. Carry it wrong, and it burns you before it burns the dark. Pressure mounted around Richard, too. His board asked pointed questions about discrepancies. Journalists sniffed near his contracts. Regulators sent polite letters. He crushed them all with lawyers and charm. Yet at night, he still saw Noah in his mind's eye, calm, ragged, notebook glowing in the dark. So he struck first. Find him, Richard ordered. Pay the police. Pay the shelters. I want him removed. The hunt began. Officers rousted camps, swept alleys, drove the homeless from corners where they'd been tolerated. But Noah had learned invisibility long ago. He melted into the cracks, always one block ahead. One evening, as rain streaked the library windows, Marcus found Noah pale and coughing. You can't keep this up. He'll crush you. Noah smiled weakly. He's already afraid. That means he can't crush the truth, only me. Marcus clenched his fists. Then let me take the risk. Let me put my name on it. No, Noah said, eyes steady. Your name must carry it after mine is gone. That's how stories survive. Meanwhile, Arya's curiosity grew. She began seeking Noah deliberately, though she never told her father. She found him near the old railway once, explaining probability to a group of street kids using bottle caps. Why are you teaching them? She asked after they scattered. Because no one else will, he answered simply. And because knowledge grows when shared, even in the dark. Her chest tightened. For the first time, she saw the contrast. A father who measures success in towers, and a ragged stranger who measured it in bottle caps. And she wondered which was closer to real wealth. The storm finally broke on a Thursday night. Richard received an anonymous envelope at his office. Inside, photocopies of invoices, plate numbers, notes in a hand he recognized instantly. Noah's hand. At the bottom of the last page, a line was scrawled. Truth doesn't belong to you. Richard slammed his desk. Enough! He called his lawyers. He called the police. He even called the editor of the city's largest paper, offering favors to suppress stories that hadn't yet been written. For once, his charm faltered. The editor only replied, "We're already hearing from someone named Marcus Chen." Richard froze. The name meant nothing to him, but the implication was clear. The pieces were moving, and he no longer held the board. That night, Noah wrote in his notebook by the glow of the river lights, "The fire is lit. He will try to drown it, but fire travels faster than water when the wind is right. And tonight, the wind is changing." He closed the notebook, coughed into the dark, and whispered, "Be useful, even in the dark." The story broke on a Monday morning. Headlines screamed across the city. Billionaire Richard Sterling linked to offshore accounts. Meridian Logistics exposed as shell company. Marcus Chen's byline was small at the bottom, but his words cut sharper than any front-page font. He described patterns of payments, contracts that circled back on themselves, shredded documents reconstructed into dangerous clarity. And woven through the article was a quiet thread of witness, an unnamed source who studied in the shadows, a man overlooked by the city, but not by the truth. Richard Sterling's empire shook. At dawn, phones rang in his penthouse like alarms. Partners demanded explanations. Regulators promised investigations. A senator he had funded for years refused his call. The stock dipped, not disastrously, but enough to rattle confidence. Richard hurled the newspaper across his desk. "Find them," he barked at his chief of security. "The reporter, the source, break them." "Yes, sir," the man said grimly. Meanwhile, Noah Hale watched the storm unfold from the public library, his hands trembling over the newsprint. For years he had been invisible. Now, pieces of his handwriting sat in the city's most powerful paper. "You did it," Marcus whispered, almost in awe. "This is real. They can't bury it anymore." Noah shook his head. "Truth doesn't end with ink. Ink can smear. They'll try to smear you, or me, or both." Already his prediction came true. Other papers ridiculed Marcus as gullible, called the anonymous source a deranged vagrant. Talk shows laughed, a billionaire brought down by a bum with a notebook. One host jeered. "Sounds like fiction." Marcus clenched his fists. "We need you to step forward, to show your face, tell your story." Noah's eyes narrowed. "And then what? They call me crazy to my face instead of behind my back? They'll parade my failures and bury the evidence." "No, the proof stands without me. But the people forget names. They remember stories. The story is what matters." At Sterling Tower, the board gathered in emergency session. Suits rustled. Voices snapped. "This is untenable," one director hissed. "Regulators are circling. Investors are pulling out." "Deny everything," Richard said coldly. "Denying isn't enough. They have documents." "Then they have lies," Richard snapped. "And lies can be burned." But beneath his steel, unease festered. The documents weren't lies. He knew it. The only question was how much Noah still held. That evening, Arya came home to find her father pacing the glass balcony, phone pressed to his ear. She had seen him angry before, but never afraid. "Fix it," he barked. "I don't care what it costs. Make it disappear." He ended the call and froze when he saw her. "Is it true?" she asked softly. His eyes hardened. "What have you heard?" "The papers. The whispers at school. They say you build everything on lies." "Do you believe them?" She wanted to say no, to defend him, but the memory of Noah's calm voice under the street lamp returned. Truth doesn't fit on tests. I don't know, she admitted, but I know someone does. Who? Richard demanded. Arya hesitated, then turned away. Her silence was answer enough. The hunt for Noah intensified. Police swept alleys again, citing trespass ordinances. Shelters closed their doors under quiet pressure. Marcus received threatening calls, warning him to leave trash where it belongs. One night, as Noah left the library, 2 men in suits cornered him under the awning. "Your Hale?" one asked. Noah met his eyes steadily. "Depends who's asking. We represent parties interested in your notes." "Hand them over." Noah held his notebook tight against his chest. "These pages don't belong to you. Everything belongs to someone," the man sneered. He lunged. But Noah had lived years on streets where danger wore many faces. He twisted, stumbled deliberately, letting the blow glance off. The notebook stayed in his grip. A passerby shouted. The men fled into the rain. Noah sank against the wall, heart pounding. His ribs ached. His breath came ragged, but the notebook was safe. He whispered to himself, "Be useful, even broken." Marcus insisted they move Noah into hiding. "Stay with me, at least for a while." Noah shook his head. "If they catch me under your roof, they'll call it collusion. You'll lose everything. Better they think I'm smoke than see I'm still fire." Marcus gritted his teeth. "You'll get yourself killed." "Maybe, but truth doesn't die with one man, only with silence." Back at the mansion, Arya found the courage to ask her father again. "Why are you so afraid of him?" she asked. "Because he's nothing," Richard roared. "A filthy vagrant who thinks scribbles make him powerful." Arya stepped closer, her voice trembling but strong. "Then why do his scribbles scare you more than the stock market?" The question cut him deeper than any accusation. He had no answer. That weekend, Marcus arranged a secret meeting. In a dim cafe after closing, Noah waited, hood pulled low. Marcus arrived with a flash drive. "Here," Marcus whispered, "backups of everything. If they take you, it won't die." Noah accepted it, eyes heavy. "You're risking more than you know." Marcus smiled grimly. "So are you." From the corner, a shadow stirred. Arya stepped forward, having followed Marcus's trail. "Noah," she breathed. "It's you." He stiffened, then nodded. "And you're his daughter." Arya's throat tightened. "Why are you doing this? You could disappear. Why fight?" Noah's voice was quiet, steady. "Because once I had a son. He believed the world was fair until it proved otherwise. I couldn't save him. But maybe I can save someone else from believing lies too long." Tears stung her eyes. For the first time, she saw him not as a ragged figure, but as a man carrying grief like a second skin. "Will you ever forgive him?" she whispered. Noah didn't answer. He only looked at her notebook in Marcus's hands. Forgiveness is for people. This fight is for truth. Outside, headlights flared. Black cars slid up the street. Marcus cursed. "They found us." Noah shoved the flash drive into Arya's hand. "You're invisible to them. Keep it. If I fall, don't let this fall too." Before she could answer, the cafe doors burst open. Security men stormed in. Marcus was shoved against the counter. Noah was grabbed, arms pinned. Arya cried out, "Stop! He's done nothing wrong." The men ignored her. One spat. "Sterling wants this trash gone." Noah met her eyes calmly, even as they dragged him toward the door. "Remember," he said, Truth is fire. Carry it right. Then he was gone into the night, swallowed by steel and rain. Arya clutched the flash drive to her chest, heart hammering. For the first time, she understood. This wasn't just her father's war. It was hers too. That night, Richard Sterling sat in his tower, staring at the skyline. His phone buzzed. "It's done," his man said. Richard nodded. But instead of relief, a strange emptiness spread inside him. Because for all his wealth, for all his power, he had finally admitted to himself the truth. He was more afraid of one homeless man with a notebook than of every billionaire in the city combined. And somewhere below, in the dark, the fire Noah had lit was only beginning to spread. The night Noah was dragged away, rain lashed the city like punishment. Arya couldn't sleep. She sat at her desk, the flash drive clutched in her hand, staring at its black plastic shell as if it contained the universe. In a way, it did. Inside were the pieces, every invoice, every plate number, every shredded scrap Noah had stitched into meaning. The fire he had spoken of was now hers to carry. By morning, the house felt like a fortress of glass and lies. Her father sat at the breakfast table in his immaculate suit, sipping coffee, pretending nothing had happened. "Eat," Richard said without looking up. "I can't," Arya whispered. He glanced at her. "Why?" "Because you had him taken," she said. The cup stopped midway to his lips. His voice dropped. "You don't know what you're saying." "I know enough." She placed the flash drive on the table between them. "This is what you're afraid of." His face strained of color. For the first time, Richard Sterling looked not ruthless, not cold, but small. "Where did you get that?" "He trusted me." What ease of calmer. "You have no idea what's inside." "I do," she said firmly. "And so will everyone else if you don't stop this." For a long moment, they stared at each other, father and daughter with an empire of silence between them. Finally, Richard whispered, "Give it to me." "No." She stood, her hands trembling but her voice unyielding. "The truth doesn't belong to you anymore." Marcus met her later that day at the library. His face was bruised from the raid, but his eyes were fierce. "You still have it?" he asked. Arya nodded. "We can publish everything. Names, dates, proof." He hesitated. "If we do this, your father goes down. Hard." "I know," she said. "But if we don't, I go down with him. And so does everyone who believed lies too long." Meanwhile, Noah sat in a holding cell that smelled of rust and sweat. His ribs ached, his head throbbed, but his spirit was steady. When the officer mocked him, "So you're the genius who thinks trash is treasure?" Noah only replied, "Truth is truth, no matter where it hides." By evening, a lawyer arrived, paid not by Richard Sterling, but by a coalition of journalists who had read Marcus's article and wanted to protect the source. Within hours, Noah was released. He stepped into the cold night air, coughing, but smiling faintly. He was free not because of wealth or power, but because the story had already outgrown him. The next day, the second article dropped. This one wasn't speculation. It was proof. Invoices scanned, contracts highlighted, shell accounts traced, every piece cross-checked against Noah's meticulous notes. The headline read, "The Confetti of Lies: How Richard Sterling Built His Empire on Fraud." Wild, this time the city didn't laugh. Banks froze accounts. Regulators announced formal investigations. Shareholders fled. Richard Sterling's empire, built on glass and bravado, began to fracture. Arya stood on the steps of the academy when the news spread. Students whispered, some with pity, some with scorn. But she didn't shrink. For the first time, she felt taller than her name. When Noah appeared at the edge of the courtyard, ragged and exhausted, she ran to him. "You're free," she said, tears in her eyes. "For now," he rasped, smiling faintly. "But the truth is freer than both of us." At home, Richard faced his board. They shouted, cursed, demanded answers. For once, he had none. That evening, he found Arya in her room, notebook open, pen in hand. "I suppose you hate me," he said quietly. She looked up. "I don't, but I can't respect lies." He sat heavily on her bed, shoulders bowed. "I built everything to protect you. The towers, the fortune, the power. And now you've torn it down." "No," she said gently. "I didn't. The truth did. I only refused to hide it." His eyes burned. For years he had feared weakness. Now he feared something else, that his daughter was stronger than he'd ever been. The final reckoning came in court. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashed, and Richard Sterling walked into the building, flanked by lawyers. But all eyes turned when Noah Hale entered too, his clothes ragged, his hair unkempt, but his posture straight, his notebook clutched like scripture. He took the stand. "I am no one," Noah said to the court. "The city calls me trash, but trash can show what others throw away. And what I found shows not just mistakes, but choices. Choices to deceive, to steal, to build glass towers on broken backs. I may have no address, but the truth has one now, here." The silence that followed was heavier than marble. Weeks later, the empire of Richard Sterling lay in ruins. Some assets seized, others sold. He was not yet in prison. Lawyers worked their craft, but his name no longer commanded awe. It commanded suspicion. And Daria? She walked through the academy halls no longer as the girl shielded by wealth, but as someone who had carried fire and not been burned. Noah remained homeless. The city did not crown him a hero. Some still crossed the street to avoid him. But in certain corners, the library, the shelter, the courtyard of a school where a billionaire's daughter sometimes sat beside him with a notebook, he was no longer invisible. One afternoon, Arya asked him, "Do you regret it, exposing him?" Noah smiled, weary but true. "Regret is for things done in shadows. I've lived in shadows long enough. Truth belongs in light." She nodded. "Then maybe one day, people will see you the way I do." Noah chuckled softly. "One honest soul is enough." They sat in silence. The ragged man and the daughter of the fallen millionaire, sunlight spilling across their notebooks. For the first time in a long time, the city felt just a little more honest. And for Noah Hale, that was wealth enough.